welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelley Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today, we are excited to welcome Wendy Katz to the show. Wendy is a compassionate and credentialed dog trainer who has dedicated decades to helping people and their dogs live more harmonious, enjoyable lives together. Wendy has worked with everything from rambunctious adolescents to fearful rescues, and she brings a unique combination of personal experience, scientific training, and professional certification to her work. She's a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner, a CPDT-KA, a fear-free professional, a certified Control Unleashed Instructor, and a Family Dog Mediator. With a Ph.D. in biology and a background in biomedical research, Wendy is deeply committed to evidence-based, force-free methods and ongoing learning. Whether she's supporting a family through puppyhood or helping a reactive dog gain confidence and calm, Wendy approaches every case with curiosity, care, and a deep respect for the human-dog bond. I said that backwards on the bio here. It's written the dog-human bond, but I think it works either way. Welcome, Wendy. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Shelley. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to have you here, too. I always look forward to when I see that you have posted something in the Animal Training Academy, or when I see that you have commented on somebody else's post. I always look forward to reading what you have to say. You always have just so much valuable information to contribute in the ATA community, and you do so in a way that does demonstrate that curiosity and care and respect that was referenced in your bio. So I'm excited to have you here today to talk more with you and share some of your wonderful knowledge and experience with our audience. So could you get us started off today by telling us just a little bit about your story, how you started working with animals, and how that led to the work that you're doing today, and sharing a little bit about that with us?
Sure. So I'm one of those kids who was attracted to animals from my earliest memories, and our family always had dogs and cats. Before I was born, my parents had or when I was born, had an Irish Terrier named Clancy O'Shaughnessy. And he was a sweet dog, but when I was a toddler, he knocked me down and chipped one of my baby teeth, and he became an outdoor dog after that, which was sad. But when I was about 8 years old, we lived on a really quiet cul-de-sac, and my mom would let me take him out on leash, and he would allow me to hold on to his leash while he sniffed his way around the cul-de-sac. So that was my first foray into dog handling. We got a miniature poodle puppy when I was around 10, and I took him to a dog obedience class at our SPCA. And at that time, which was in the 60s, it was all kind of training where you walk around in a circle and they had choke chains on and you jerk on them. And I didn't like doing that to my dogs, so I wasn't as consistent as you have to be to train like that. So we got through it, but it wasn't very effective or satisfying. Then we adopted a Springer Spaniel mix, probably mixed with Lab puppy. And he became my best buddy and helped me survive my teenage years. We took long walks in the hills whenever teenage aunts set in. At that point, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, I worked in a vet clinic for a few years. And this was when credentialing was just becoming a thing. So I was able to do lots of things that an uncredentialed assistant wouldn't be allowed to do now. And again, there was a lot of force used. So, I spent my most formative years just having this instilled in me, struggling later to overcome it. It's been quite a journey. I actually got discouraged about going to vet school. Not so much that is that when I was working in the clinic, I got really fascinated by reading the medication inserts and thinking about how the drugs worked. And I just loved looking at the structures and reading about them and got really interested in biochemistry. So I ended up going to graduate school and getting a degree that was kind of a combination of cell biology and molecular genetics. And that led to a decades-long career in biomedical research. I couldn't have dogs at that point because living in apartments and spending long hours in labs. I had a cat who I was very close to. He was the cat of my heart. And I had no awareness of positive reinforcement training at that point. So, I had no idea that we could have enjoyed training together. But we had a fun relationship. And as soon as I settled down in a long-term job and bought a house, I immediately started looking for a dog. And I found a card on a bulletin board that said "free lab needs big yard," and she was actually a lab herding mix. I'm positive because of lots of factors. She was a blank slate. She'd been adopted as a child's companion. They had a 5-year-old daughter, and basically let her run free in this like unfenced middle-class neighborhood until she was about 9 months old, and her friendly Labrador greetings were just terrorizing the whole neighborhood. So they said, you have to tie her up. And they knew that was no life for a dog and started looking for a home for her. So I took her. We instantly bonded. She'd never been inside a house. And she was just so fascinated with everything I did, folding the laundry. When I watered some plants and she saw water coming out of my hands, it was just instant infatuation. She just thought that was the coolest thing. And of course, the training I was doing was the kind I knew. It was the compulsion based, and it wasn't fun for either of us. I thought I had to do it. I thought it was my responsibility. The interesting thing was that I did that because I'd been taught that's what you do. But my instincts when we were doing everything else was to give her agency and be gradual and shape it. So it's funny that was just there in the other part of me. So she'd never been in a crate. And I started out by using the bottom of her crate as a bed. Just put something cushy in it, and that's where she would sleep. She wanted a roughhousing companion, which wasn't me. She was kind of a bruising playmate. So I went and bought her a golden retriever puppy. And he happened to come with a copy of Don't Shoot the Dog. And that was, the early 90s. It was when the internet chat groups were just starting, and that's what I relied on for guidance. There really wasn't much in the way of websites. I don't think there's anything in the way of websites at that point. And when Calvin, with the Golden Retriever, was an adolescent, I found a workshop within driving distance, and we went there and met a couple from my city who told me about a clicker trainer in Lexington, and I got hooked up with her and started taking classes with her. And when we'd taken all the classes we could take, I started apprenticing with her and assisting in her classes. We also did an agility class. There was a balance training outfit in town, which had these massive sessions at big open space. It was, what was it? I forget. Anyway, they had multiple rings. You had one of those setups where they had multiple levels, and the people would just go from class to class to class. They made incredibly slow progress training the way they did. But they let me. I approached them and said, "Can I pay you a little bit and just train on the fringes and use you as distractions?" So I did that. Got to know some of them. ended up taking an agility class with them, and later a canine good citizen test. And the funny thing is that they always exclaimed, for one thing, in the agility class, Cassie was the only one who got a clean run the first time we ran a sequence. And when I took the CGC test, they marveled at her healing. And the healing was a really interesting thing, because that was one of the things that shut down when I was training the old way with compulsion. She just didn't want anything to do with it and poisoned the cue. So I just dropped that entirely for a long time. And then by the time we started again, I'd been with the new trainer and the clicker trainer and teaching Calvin the new way. And I'd also encountered, there was a trainer named Don Yates who had a method called Choose to Heal, where you just walk around in an open space. And when the dog comes near heel position, you click and treat. And if they drift away, you do a left about turn and walk away and wait for them to find you again. So it's basically capturing heel position and then shaping duration and precision. And the raspberries were just coming ripe. And after the dogs ate all the ones at dog height, I could pick the ones that were high up and use those as reinforcers. And that's how Cassie learned to love healing. She had an amazing heel. And it even rehabilitated the cue. I'd also poison fetched. The minute I tried an ear pinch, that was when we both gave up. And I never used that cue again. I ended up using Get It, but she did. I reshaped to retrieve, and she learned to pick up anything. She carried a basket of candy in a Christmas parade. I shaped her to pick up my keys and then to find them when they were hidden. And that was her favorite trick. She was obsessed with my keys. And she trained me to put them away, because if I left them anywhere in her reach, she would pick them up and bring them to me. So that experience is when I realized that what I love most about training is what it tells me about their thought processes. It's really a way of getting deep into their minds, and especially when they choose to question my agenda. I'd read on one of the clicker lists that you should use treats of different value for different behaviors. And so I get my bag of Cheerios and I get my bag of meat and I put them on a chair. And I asked Cassie to do something really simple. I forget if it was touch or sit, but something that's super basic. And she did it, and I clicked and gave her a Cheerio. And she glared at me, and she stomped over to the chair. And she was a dog who really respected rules and structure. So she wouldn't have thought of taking the meat. She walked up the chair and she gave the bag of meat a big poke with her nose and she glared at me again. It was perfectly clear what she was saying. So I gave her the meat and I mixed it all together and made a trail mix. That's what we used to train with from then on. After I'd been with this trainer for a while, we started a doggy daycare together. It was the first one in Lexington. And this was an incredible opportunity for learning about different dog personalities, behavior styles. And I kind of doodle around with training some of them once in a while, just get used to training, different sorts of dogs. I also started fostering dogs for rescue, which was also an incredible learning experience. Some of them came to us through the daycare, and some of them through Rhodesian Ridgeback Rescue. I got really interested in that breed and ended up adopting one. We'll get to him later. And I fell in love with several of the girl fosters, but Cassie saved me from foster failing because she would not tolerate any female dog to stay for more than a couple of weeks. She was one of those dogs who was so intuitive. She made me feel like a hotshot trainer because when I lumped or got careless, she could connect the dots. But Calvin was super sensitive. He was just as intelligent. He loved working, but I had to split really finely or he'd get overwhelmed. So training him taught me a lot. He was the first dog to teach me that I was sometimes okay to let the dog set the agenda because, in traditional training, we were taught never let the dog get away with it. You have to make them do whatever you ask them to do. I would never have dreamed of doing this with that dog because he was so sensitive. But there were two occasions that I can think of where I gave him a cue that he thought was unreasonable. He gave me that big brown-eyed golden retriever look. And I realized what I'd asked him was unreasonable. One time we we parked some in a big field somewhere, and I thought I was just going to let him out the potty and get back in the car and asked me to get back in the car. And he looked at me and he clearly said, "There's this field out here. How can we not play in the field?" So I said, "Yeah." So we romped in the field for a couple of minutes, and then he happily got in the car. After a few years in the daycare, my partner and I kind of agreed to go our ways. I sold my share to her and went out on my own. I worked part-time at a local shelter, which was my next super valuable learning experience. My title was vet tech. I was still uncredentialed, but I did blood draws for heartworm and feline leukemia tests. I did vaccinations, and I did all the health monitoring and care. And they had, at the time, the ASPCA had a test, I think it was called a caninality assessment. And so I was doing some it's sort of temperament testing, sort of behavior style, trying to match up the right dog with the person with the right expectations. And that was really interesting. And then I got an irresistible job offer from someone at the university. So I went back to the university. I had left, I neglected to say, I'd been on a tenure track position when I first moved to Lexington, and I just did not have the temperament for that. I had like 5 different stress related disease disorders. So that's why I went into the start of the daycare. But I got a staff position that suited me really well, and I had benefits I could not turn down. So that's what I ended up doing then for many more years. And then fast forwarding quite a few years, had different dogs in the household. I stopped training clients when Cassie and Calvin died. It was just so devastating for me that I still had 2 dogs, 2 kind of special needs dogs in the house that I met their needs and I loved them, but I just couldn't think about training. But then years went by. I got different dogs and did get interested in training them. And I saw that there's a crying need for force-free training in the community. And KPA was marketing really effectively at that time. So I went into their dog trainer professional program and got my KPA certified training card, or losing my words, certification. And the dog I had at the time was a really delightful fellow, but he was afraid of large dogs, and he had a meltdown during any thunderstorm. So I couldn't see doing workshops in Indianapolis in the late summer. So I went to the shelter, and I heroically persistent adoption coordinator hooked me up with a dog who I saw some red flags when they brought her out. She was really dissociated, but I thought, well, I'll give it a try. They had a foster to adopt situation. So that's how I signed up. And our first conversation was another example of the dog setting the agenda, because I thought when we left the adoption center, I was going to take her out to the end of the parking lot and let her walk around, sniff, pee before we got in the car. It's about a 20-minute drive home. And she'd been in a kennel. And instead, she very politely but very insistently pulled me towards where the cars were parked. And she took us straight to my car, walked around the back to the driver's side, and stopped and looked at me. She said, "Let's go home." And I was just blown away. I was instantly smitten. So she did end up having the problems I feared when I saw the red flags, but it was another one of those learning experiences that the universe brought me. She had a very specific trigger for biting people, and that was an education for me. But she did great in KPA. Everyone handled her appropriately, of course. We managed all the dogs appropriately, and we had no problems at all there. So we graduated from KPA at the end of 2013, and I started moonlighting as a dog trainer while I was staying in my career job. I retired from that career at the start of 2023. And since then, I've been full-time into dog training and behavior work. So I split my time between catering to 2 spoiled Australian shepherds and helping other people with their dogs. And, I love starting puppies off well, but it's hard people don't realize they need help until the puppy is older. So I mostly get behavior therapy cases and adolescent dogs with annoying adolescent behaviors. Um, and I'm kind of addicted to continuing education, and I've really been really been embracing the trend towards focusing before anything else on building resilience and meeting a dog's need to do dog things, and find that either solves or greatly diminishes a whole lot of problems. And when you think about it, that's the first two levels of the humane hierarchy. On that highway diagram, the first level is described as health, nutrition, and physical setting. And the second is antecedent arrangement. And when you unpack those, especially antecedent arrangement, it's huge. I think traditionally we thought of that as setting things up to prevent behaviors we don't want, which of course is important. But it's at least as important, if not more, to set the environment up to meet the dog's emotional needs. So I've been really leaning into that. I do a lot with that 7-part resilience framework that Bobby Bambry and Kathy Murphy published in the IAABC journal. And when we provide for those needs, the amount of teaching that's needed is smaller and easier. And yeah, so that's where I am.
Gosh, thank you for sharing all of that with us, Wendy. But I want to jump in and ask you some questions about what you were just talking about. But before I do that, I want to be sure that I have the right names of those dogs to thank for their contributions too. So Miss Cassie was the lab, is that right?
Yes, she was the lab mix, dog of my heart.
Calvin was the golden retriever.
Yes.
Wonderful. And then what was the name of the dog who led you straight to your car, your KPA partner?
That was Juni, Juni.
Juni. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you to all of those dogs, as well as your miniature poodle. And wasn't it a miniature poodle?
Yes,
one
it
of
was.
them in your childhood. Yes.
Yeah.
And all of the others, as well as the two Aussies who you live with today. Do you want to share with everybody just a little bit about them?
Sure. So, I never thought I would adopt a purebred dog again. I have Ridgeback I'll get to when we get to some of your later questions. But during COVID lockdown time, Judy, she'd been having some chronic respiratory problems, and she died rather suddenly. And this was the time when there were no dogs in the shelters. It was really hard to find an appropriate dog. I did not really want a project dog. And so I got on my local network and described what I was looking for. And someone pointed me to an Aussie breeder in Western Kentucky who was kind of downsizing. And she had a dog who had her second litter, and she wanted her to have a life away from the farm, and specifically wanted her to go to a trainer because she had some baggage. She had actually been purchased at 8 weeks and returned at 10 weeks. And we're not sure what happened in the interim, but she was pretty shut down. And she's really blossomed. She's an amazing dog. And she's such a perfect, I call it practically perfect in every way, like Mary Poppins. She's such an amazing dog that when her daughter had a litter, I decided to get one of her grandbabies. And of course, they could hardly be more different personalities, but I love Bess just as much. She just turned 2. Molly's about to turn 9. And Molly has been an amazing partner. I used to call myself the queen of half-baked behaviors, because what I've loved is just seeing that light bulb moment. And but with Molly, I started taking classes with a coach close to me who got me into rally obedience and kind of nurtured and nagged me into actually entering trials. And I haven't trained anything to fluency since KPA, but it's really been fun. The wonderful thing about rally is you can really get into a flow when you're running a course and you and the dog are both in sync. It's just a really cool feeling. So um, we easily got her novice and intermediate titles, and you advance when you start doing jumps. And she's getting on in years and has, I think, having some pain issues. So her career's stopping there, and we're focusing on other activities now. But that's been really fun.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about Miss Molly and Bess with us today, too. We get to see them in Animal Training Academy, and it's always fun seeing their very different personalities and the things that you're doing with them. And I think I have that crown currently of the queen of half-baked behaviors. Is that what you called it? I think. Yeah, definitely. I love that light bulb moment as well. And I love like training new things, and then they just kind of get set to the side. I could see where having, committing to a competition or some sort of event or something would help to get one a little bit more motivated, I guess, to train to fluency. But so far, I'm still in the half baked with most of our training. I would love to talk to you about some of the stuff that you were talking. You talked about so much great stuff that I have a million questions for you about all of your background. Very interesting, from your time in the doggy daycare and your time as a vet tech and your time as a biomedical researcher. All so interesting, and I feel like could be podcast in and of themselves. But the thing that I'm going to kind of zero in on here that I'd love to dive into just a little bit more is what you were, as you were wrapping up your story, what you just started touching on as far as the importance of building resilience and meeting dogs' needs, and how powerful that can be in with lots of things, including with helping with some behavior problems. And I loved what you said about, how we've historically, I think, thought about antecedent arrangement really well as far as the prevention side of things, but how it can be equally important in setting up appropriate antecedent arrangement for opportunity for dogs in order to meet their needs. And I'm wondering, and you mentioned if you want to tell us in a minute, maybe a little bit more about this too, but you mentioned the 7-part resilience framework. Are you incorporating this with your clients right now?
I am, especially with a lot of the behavior cases. So the framework came, many of the steps actually came from human trauma recovery and resilience building research. And of course, at the emotional level, our brains are similar enough that we can, even though there's less research in dogs, we can figure that there's a lot of parallel application. So the parts of that framework are physical and mental well-being. I put that at the top of the list. Safety and security, predictability, choice and agency, social support, and decompression and completing the stress cycle. Decompression means things like snuffle mats, licking and chewing opportunities, chances to run for dogs who need to do that. My younger Aussie absolutely needs a good run several times a week. She decompresses by shredding plastic. I keep this tub of recycling things. And when she needs to cool off, she goes and gets a piece of plastic and rips pieces off of it. And you do those things, and it brings arousal down. Predictability, those Control Unleashed pattern games play a big part of that, because they give the dogs a predictable framework into which you can introduce things that stress them and help them process and learn to cope.
And I'm curious, when you are on a consult or when you're working with a client who's dealing with a behavioral challenge or a behavior challenge, and you're going to utilize this framework to help you in that process, do you use this kind of language, like the steps that you just worked through? Do you use that to present this idea to them? Or do you kind of sneak it in a little bit more of a backdoor sort of way with people? I'm just wondering how receptive in your experience, people are to this?
Yeah, it depends on the client. And I'm still experimenting with the most effective way to introduce this. I do have a handout that lists them and suggestions for things to do in each category. And I invite them to brainstorm what feels comfortable to them and what they feel they can do or what they think would fit their dog's needs because they know their dog better than I do. Um, and it is a little intimidating for most people. So I'm trying to figure out a way to, I think, present it more gradually and get them more engaged with it. I'm taking a class with Christina Spalding right now. She has a class called Unlocking Resilience, which is wonderful. I took that. She has a follow-up, a group called Unlocking Resilience Grabs. It's just an amazing group of people. We get together and have these really dirty conversations. And then she has this class, which is called it's an occasional thing called Science in Action, where we actually choose projects to work on and brainstorm with each other and kind of help each other talk through roadblocks. And I'm using this as my project in that class right now. So it's a work in progress.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing about all of that with us. And I'll look forward to hearing how that continues to develop for you. And thank you for the shout out to Christina Spalding as well. She's been on the ATA podcast with Ryan before and has created some content for ATA in the community before as well. And I have thought about those classes before and have not made the jump yet. So I appreciate you reminding me about those. Definitely great opportunities. Well, I could keep talking about all of that and more, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on and ask you if you could share with us about a training related challenge that you have experienced and maybe kind of walk us through how you worked through a particular challenge and some of the lessons you learned from doing so.
Okay. The one that stands out to me is my Rhodesian Ridgeback. I'd befriended a local breeder after I saw a Ridgeback, and I thought it was the most beautiful dog I'd ever seen. So I bet her dogs. She became my breed mentor. And she learned that one of her co-breeders was holding on to a young dog just because they hoped he would go larger, but they weren't doing anything with him. He was crated for way too many hours of the day. She was really incensed and trying to get him out of that situation. She tried to give him to me when he was 8 months old, and I just opened the daycare and didn't have the bandwidth. So she took him into her home for a while. And then by the time he was coming up on 2 years old, she knew how to push my buttons. So she said, I think the kind of training you do is just what he needs. I'd been talking to her about clicker training, and she had not embraced it, but she was right. He was a mess. He'd had hardly any socialization and been handled very coercively when they needed to clip toenails, things like that. He was so averse to being touched. He had to wear drag lines for the first week or so we could move him from place to place because he wouldn't let anyone get near him. And he had to go to work with me in the morning and go home with me at night. So that was an adventure. And I was afraid that doing formal training sessions would overwhelm him and poison the clicker. So I just chose a simple behavior to click at very infrequent and random times during the day. And the behavior I chose was just turning his head to the left. And I did this for a few days. I wish I kept a journal on him, and I don't know what happened to it. But I vividly remember every detail of the scenario on the day he had his light bulb moment. I clicked a head turn. He looked at me, and very slowly and deliberately, he turned his head again. And I still choke up when I think about it. It was just so amazing. I clicked and treated, and we were on our way. And clicker was God to him after that. It was the first human communication that ever made sense. And eventually I was able to do consensual nail grinding with him. He learned all sorts of other things. We did an online agility class, and he went from being afraid of visitors to being this big old love bug. So that was just a really heartwarming experience.
I love that moment that you talked about. And this is probably partially what contributes to me being one of the queens of half-baked behaviors. But there's something so addictive about that moment that you talked about when he turned his head and then turned and looked and very deliberately turned it again. Like, is this it? That moment of communication is just so cool to see.
Yeah, he really went from being a fugitive to being a partner. That was the start. That moment was the start.
And what was his name?
His name was Justin.
Justin?
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect name for a dog, isn't it? I love it. Justin. And how long was Justin with you?
Um, I got him when he was 2. I think he developed a downstream effects of a parathyroid tumor when he
Hmm.
was around 10. I lost him then.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. It sounds like he had a wonderful influence on you.
We had 8 good years. He actually he went from being the Omega dog with Cassie and Calvin to being the elder statesman when I got the next dog. That was so cool to see.
And when you first got him, when he was the fugitive, handling it all was just a no-go. You said he had to wear
Yeah.
that drag line, and so you moved from there to consensual nail grinding with him and more. Um, just by, I guess, building step by step on that clicker training that you did, that
Yep.
initial. Yeah.
JP.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about Justin and his part of your journey with us today. Could you share with us also about a training situation that you're proud of and or that you have found reinforcing?
Yeah. Training my own pets is reinforcing since I keep doing it. I just love seeing clients. It's not always a delightful moment, but it's really starting to enjoy training instead of thinking it's a chore. Um, they start to pick up the mechanics and the skills. So one of the things I teach with dogs who have lots of feelings is Dr. Karen Overall's what she calls biofeedback breathing. In Control Unleashed, we just call it take a breath. Um, and only a subset of the clients get it, but when they do, they get a visible thrill out of it. And it's just so fun to watch them doing it because they and the dog get a mutual feedback thing going. And it really makes at that point, it makes a huge difference in the dog's behavior. I love it when a client, this is funny, they always sound a little surprised. They say, this is fun. And just knowing that they're enjoying what they're doing. Or the other thing is when I suggest a behavior hack and it's like, well, yeah, we're not training the dog, but they're polite and don't say it. And then I come back the next week and they have this, again, it's this slightly wondering tone. And they say, I think you suggested it worked. So I guess one family in particular stands out because I've worked with 3 dogs with them. The first dog, their preteen son was their primary handler. And they went through a class and years went by. And then she adopted, that was an adolescent that they'd raised from a puppy. And then a few years later, she adopted a rescue who had some issues. And when I got there, she was kind of at a loss. But the son, the one I'd worked with, had no problem managing, interacting with the dog. And that was just so cool to see that, it had sunk in and transferred. But I was very proud of that. And then she moved out of state for a time, came back years later. Both of the initial dogs were gone, and I've helped her raise a Samoyed puppy, which is a challenging breed. It's a pretty independent breed. This dog is reinforced by making us laugh. So fun to work with. It doesn't always do what we hope she will do. But what's really cool and what I'm really proud of is that she has picked up the training skills at this point. She's very competent at handling this dog. And that's just a real pleasure for me to see.
That's wonderful. What a gift to be able to give to people that they can build those skills. I think that's what those of us who are working directly with people and their dogs, coaching them, I think that's what we all aspire to, is to see them have the ability to implement those things. So wonderful. I love that they kept coming back to you as well, and that you get to be such an incredible part of their journey and see that as she continues to grow in her own training with him. And I love your example of take a breath too, and how reinforcing it is for you. I wondered when you mentioned that you were using it with people and enjoyed using it, I was wondering how well people kind of took to it, so I wasn't surprised to hear you say that a lot of people don't kind of quote unquote get it, but when you see it, it's really cool to see that. And I know just for myself in doing take a breath with my own dogs, that and for me, when I do it, I don't know if this is the way that you teach it or not, but when I do it, my breathing is part of the cue. I take a deep, and so then that reciprocal breathing is just really reinforcing. Yeah. And so that reminded me when you were talking about Take a Breath and Dr. Overall's work, that reminded me that, and you mentioned it earlier in the episode, and it's in your bio as well, of course, that you're a Control Unleashed instructor. So do you use, I assume, a lot of Leslie McDevitt's Control Unleashed games in your work with people too?
Definitely.
Yeah. And do you find any of those, I'm sure, each one is going to be situation dependent, of course, but do you have any favorites that you find that people do kind of take to just immediately, or that you use quite a bit with people and their dogs?
I use the very basic pattern games, up and down and ping pong, a lot because they're so easy to teach. They help the handler assess their dog's emotional state by how, the rate at which they're able to do it. And it's a great distractor on walks. I remember working with one dog, and I was taking a walk with the client, just giving her tips on managing. And at some point, they passed a dog on the opposite side of the street, which sometimes was a occasion for an outburst. And we just turned her dog around and got her doing ping pong. And she goes, this is a moment when I see the heavens opening and angels singing. It just never occurred to her that she could redirect the dog and keep her occupied instead of going over the top.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And also just such a great way to not only redirect and keep her attention, but now you've got that attention and a whole nother behavior that's now being reinforced in the presence of that other dog.
Exactly. And you can start to build an expectation that when a dog appears, we're going to play that.
Yeah. And it's so reinforcing, I'm sure, for you to see that first realization from the person, I can kind of get their attention and keep their focus this way. And then each realization as they build from there too, in the ways that we were just talking about. Yeah. When they realize that, not only can I get their attention, but I'm actually teaching them something different to do in this scenario. So, yeah. Very cool. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us so far today. Could you share with us how people can get in touch with you? What kind of services you offer? If people are interested in chatting with you more or working with you, where would they look to find you?
They can find me via my website. I have contact information there. It's enjoyabledogs.com.
Okay. Wonderful. I love the name of your business, Enjoyable Dogs. Clearly helping people have enjoyable dogs in their life is a big motivator for you. And people you're in Lexington, is that right? In the Lexington area?
Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah. So people in the Lexington, Kentucky area are lucky to have you there, helping them enjoy their dogs and helping their dogs enjoy them a bit more. Well, I appreciate everything that you have had to share today. I really loved all of the dog stories that you shared, and I also loved what you had to share about the resilience framework and the Control Unleashed work that you're doing, and just all of the wonderful work that you're doing in the world and all of the ripples that you're spreading. So from myself, on behalf of our audience, on behalf of ATA, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today.
Thanks for having me.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.